Hello and welcome to SafeR Journeys, a podcast dedicated to raising children, ending violence, and ending oppression. We are your hosts. I'm Melissa, the Community Engagement Director with Safe Journeys, a domestic and sexual violence agency in Central Illinois.
Yeah, and I'm Heather. I am a preventionist, community engagement specialist, a variety of different things you could call me, educator, any of those things, researcher. I'm happy to use the title. So again, I'm Heather. I'm here with Melissa. This is season 2 of SafeR Journeys. I'm very, very excited.
Same.
I know. And like, as you were saying the first part about like what our podcast does, I was like, we didn't get to talk about oppression very much in season 1.
Yeah. Like we mentioned it on the sidelines of things, like it was always in the background, but I think it's so important that we address how there are more risk factors with people with multiple marginalized identities and to kind of dive into those and not saying people are risk factors because of who they are or what they're experiencing. However, it just adds on, they have a higher risk of victimization if they are in these groups. Yeah. Because they're more vulnerable. Yes. And that's no fault of theirs.
No, it's society's fault, right? And the worst part is you can't say like it's one person or one piece of society that's at fault. It's really all of it.
Right.
And over the years, how that's come to be what it is. I know. Yeah. And did you say intersectionality? We should probably say that, what it is. I mean, you said what it is, but you didn't use the word intersectionality.
Yeah, I didn't say what it... Yeah, I defined it, but I didn't use the term intersectionality, which is actually a coined term by Kimberly Crenshaw. So I just want to put a shout out there to her.
I know. She's like a feminist icon, for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so intersectionality is these overlapping marginalized identities, right?
Right.
Because someone who is a disability, has a marginalized ethnic or racial identity, maybe they're LGBTQ, like every time you stack another one of those marginalized identities, you're creating more complexity, first of all, but also there's going to be more obstacles, more barriers, and society just isn't set up for you to succeed.
Yeah, it's not set up with you in mind.
No, you have to fight to succeed.
Absolutely.
And if you have, 3 of those marginalized identities, you're fighting 3 times or 4 times as hard as someone else.
Which is unfair at its core.
Absolutely. Like super duper unfair, which is, well, let's talk about how it's connected to sexual violence and domestic violence and raising children, right? Yes. Because those are the main focuses of this podcast. And I know sometimes people are like, how is this necessarily connected to domestic violence or sexual violence? And absolutely, if I didn't work in this field, I would not be able to articulate how it's connected. But one of the ways I like to do that with groups of people when I'm having these discussions is I share how similar the language or the definition of oppression and the definition of abuse are.
Yes.
So oppression is essentially a constant state of struggle or disadvantage by a group of people. And it is caused by the people who are in charge of all the stuff, who's in power, right? Your legislators. I wish I could say not the pharmaceutical companies, but like them, anybody who has power and money in your society and makes the laws, of course. And those people tend to believe that power shouldn't be shared. They're inherently greedy. They have the power, and losing that power is scary. Same thing goes for an individual who's an abuser, right? Their main purpose is to maintain power and control another person. And usually that's done through, sexual violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, stalking, all of those things. Those are behaviors used to control and have power over someone. It's just on an individual level rather than oppression being more on a societal or cultural or worldwide level.
And I just want to take a moment I think it's become obvious. However, we are going to be talking about topics of domestic and sexual violence today. And no, it's okay because when we think about oppression and the tools that oppressors use, abuse is absolutely one of them. And I think it's just important to give our trigger warning. And if you need to take care of yourself, stop this podcast at any time. We welcome that.
Yeah, I was supposed to do the trigger warning. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. So, like I said, it is a tool of oppression. So sexual violence and domestic violence have been used as a tool of oppression since the dawn of time. If there's a relationship, there's a way to abuse it, to abuse power and control over another person. And especially like we said with intersectionality, if someone has a marginalized identity, that's a vulnerability that somebody can
exploit.
Yes, exploit is the word that I was looking for. Absolutely. And that's the thing, like we know it's used today and we know that it can be used in the future, especially if things like global catastrophes or natural disasters occur. That just has more vulnerabilities, right, on everybody involved, and then people get stressed out. Stress increases the likelihood of violence being used because what do they want? Some kind of feeling of control over. And so people will exploit that. Not everybody's like, oh, I noticed that. I am feeling like I need to have control over things right now. So now I need to use my coping skills.
It's not that explicit. No, I agree.
So that's really tough, especially for people with more marginalized identities, and it can definitely be used by the people in power who have more privilege in the situation.
Right. And like currently, and for quite some time historically, the people in power are going to be cisgendered. They're going to be straight. And primarily they are white and male for the most part. Like, so I think that's pretty indicative of what's been happening in the past, currently, and hopefully not the future. It's not looking great at this point.
It seems like we've had steps forward and then sometimes we take steps back.
Yeah. And like, I know we say that when we talk about people's healing journey as well.
Absolutely. Sure.
So maybe this is the chronic problem of mine, is expecting things to follow a straight chronological order and happen in a timely manner. But I suppose it's similar, like as our country might heal from being oppressors, moving to being more inclusive.
Yes.
It's a journey as well.
Yeah, and I really do like thinking about it that way because it is more seen as a healing and repairing and transformational journey.
Yeah.
When you think of it in not a linear fashion.
It's that whole like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
Like you still got a step forward in that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I talk like this when I talk about like grief or healing. Like I show like just this mess on a page.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, this is what it looks like. We all know it's not cut and dry.
Yes.
Like step 1, you cry. Step 2, you get angry.
Right. Like the stages of grief. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I love how you're saying this. Like, we're going to have steps forward, steps back, and all like barriers to overcome together, and there's people who are going to be bucking against those barriers.
Of course.
Or even trying to put those barriers into place too, because they'll lose some of their power. You can see how like individual issues play out on a grander scale when it comes to us all being a nation together. And I guess I'm talking more specifically to the U.S., but this could go for any nation.
No, for sure.
Any group of people that come together for a common purpose.
Any community, right? Or population.
Any community, any population.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, let's talk about how all of this, I mean, we know what oppression, why it's a no-no at this point, why it's hurtful, because it increases risks of a variety of harms.
Yes.
It keeps people from succeeding in their life or having to jump through like 20 hurdles to get to the same point that someone, who is cisgender white male would not have had to do. Also, I should say, I am not saying all cisgender white heterosexual males are jerks. Like, that is not how I feel. It is just stereotypically that's who have been the people in power.
Yes, and they certainly walk into spaces that are made for them.
Yes.
That's what privilege is about.
Yes.
Like, these spaces were created with you in mind.
Yeah.
You do not have to overcome a bunch of barriers in order to show up.
Right.
You just get to show up.
Yeah. You don't have to do your homework, right, before you show up. You don't have to think about what you're wearing to the same degree. Like I was telling Melissa earlier, I have a lot of like feminist t-shirts, things like that. I was going to a male doctor and I removed my feminist t-shirt prior because I didn't want it to affect my medical care.
Right.
Not that that particular doctor did I know anything about him, but I knew he was a male and that males can sometimes feel attacked by someone saying that they're feminist. So like I had to think about that before I went to my doctor's appointment, which, you know, my partner who is a cisgender hetero man would not have to think about.
Right.
He would just show up as he is and be like, yeah, cool. I get good care because like everybody gets good care. Right.
Yeah.
So how is this intertwined with raising children? I think there's two pieces to that because our children could become oppressors.
Yeah.
Which like, we don't want to. Melissa's eyes got real big as I said it. And you can see her being like, not my baby.
I can see how it could easily happen.
Sure.
Because power can be abused.
Yes.
So easily.
Absolutely. Or opposite, our kids could be people being oppressed.
Right.
And like that, there's a lot of oppression if your kid is autistic, right? Or neurodiverse. Your child and you, by proxy, are going to experience different versions of oppression.
Right.
For that reason.
Because there are going to be many barriers to overcome,
Yep.
Many obstacles.
And you're going to have to fight for everyone.
Absolutely. You're going to have to advocate for your child.
I'm thinking those IEP meetings.
Yes.
Like, I have heard from people who are in these meetings all the time that parents get railroaded sometimes in these IEP meetings. And like, if you have a full-time job, how are you going to be like doing your research, raising your child who has a higher level of need so that you can advocate appropriately?
Yeah, go to that meeting and know what you're talking about and make sure that your child gets, you know, the education and supports that they need and deserve.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of barriers and obstacles we're talking about when we talk about oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Melissa, you already say this is just you. It's so hard for me sometimes because I know these things about you, but I'm like, please tell the listeners how you don't want your children to be oppressors.
Oh, yeah. So,
or how you don't want your children to be affected by oppression either.
Right. But I so want them to get that there are other kids who have more obstacles than they have.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I don't want them that to weigh on them so much right now, but I just want them to understand that not everybody gets to show up so easily.
Right.
As they do, or they don't have it as easily at home. Like maybe they're sharing a room with several other siblings. They don't have their own room, or maybe their primary bed is sleeping on the couch or things like that. And those are things that they're learning just by having friends at school.
Absolutely.
Or
watching media, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I think we often forget about media.
Yeah, and media is tough too because, you know, YouTube, you have these kids opening up new things all the time. And then we have to try to get our kids to understand that we have a budget and we cannot be getting you gifts all the time or like maybe we used to, but now our budget's a lot tighter. And so now we all have to work together to be more creative with what we get it when we
prioritize.
Get it. Yeah, absolutely. And then they do help think about that.
Sure.
And it's not putting extra stress. She just understands, the 3-year-old less so, but the 6-year-old more understands and is willing to contribute to like the thought process of, you know, like thinking when we can get something or can we use what we already have in some creative way, which is great because she's like using problem solving skills. But yes, I would just hate for my kid to be the bully, right?
Oh,
like,
God, yeah.
like, well, this came up. Okay. I remember just like in kindergarten, because now she's in first grade, and she was saying to her friends, which I know her friends were saying it to her as well, because one of the friends' moms contacted me and this other mom and was like, is it who is saying this to my daughter? Like, if you do not do this thing, we cannot be friends.
Oh,
we're not going to be friends with you. And this is part of the definition of bullying, leaving somebody out on purpose repeatedly. So this is just like abuse, right? Like when we think about domestic violence, part of how we define it is it's a pattern of abuse.
Yep.
Bullying, same thing. It has to be like this repeated thing. It's unfair, one-sided, keeps happening. However, this isn't one-sided. That's the thing. They're saying it to each other, but it is, I'm not saying just because it's not bullying doesn't mean it's not wrong.
Yes.
And
unhealthy.
Yes, it's unhealthy. And that's important too. And so then we get to start saying, that's not what friendship looks like.
Right.
And it's very similar to how we talk about that's not what love looks like when it comes to intimate partner relationships and stuff. But let me tell you, it's going to start at friendship.
It starts with your parents'
Absolutely.
relationship
It's
with
your
you,
family
and then your
relationships.
friends.
And when you start branching out and like going to school and being surrounded by other people, like you have these opportunities to learn about healthy relationships with friends. And they're starting to learn that.
Yeah.
And they're going to push the boundaries just like they do with their parents. Just
it's
like they do with you
normal
caregivers.
process for learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't think that's something to like scold. I think it was a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I said, are you
moment.
saying this? And she, she's like, well, but they said it first.
Oh,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the defensive, but they said it first.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, so you are saying it.
Yeah.
Let's think about that.
It's like perspective taking. It's kind of what's going on, which
and you're
builds
teaching them
empathy. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I think this is something, empathy is like not just born in us.
No.
We have to learn this skill. And so every time this kind of stuff happens is another opportunity to teach it.
Yeah, totally. I can't remember what podcast I was listening to because I listened to quite a bit. It was the puberty podcast, maybe. Anyways, she was talking about how she likes watching media with her teen or preteen son, because then she can pull out things from the media and have these discussions that are less about like, what are you doing? What are your friends? It's like the kid in this movie or the kid in this show.
Yeah.
And like, it illustrates what she wants to say without like putting it on the kid so the kid feels bad.
Right.
So I was like, yep, this lady's a smart lady.
Yeah. Now, I just want to take it a little further just about the like, if you don't do this, we're not going to be your friend anymore. Because do you know how hard life can become when you start to be isolated by your friends, which are no longer really truly friends at school, and then you just become isolated in general, and that is going to be another risk factor for things like abuse and like just vulnerabilities to adults, to anything.
And I think the statement, if X, then Y,
it's just not okay.
It's an abusive statement.
It is, because these girls, even though they're 6, they're holding power over another person.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is.
And it's hurting them.
Yeah. Because like I'm thinking that's a pretty, not strategic, that's a pretty common example with like young people and not really getting consent, right? So like, well, if you don't have sex with me, because I'm your boyfriend or whatever, then I'm not going to continue to be your boyfriend, or then I'm not going to take you out on a date, whatever the case may be. But it's manipulation and abuse and coercion.
Yeah. So when this stuff was happening, I was beside myself. I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
I came to work, talked with another preventionist who has teenagers, and she's like, okay, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh my gosh, she's already using manipulative tactics. She's going to be a bully. It's going to be the worst thing ever. No, like she's learning, but I can see how it can go as you grow older, like, and it can be used in a manipulative way against your partner, and it's an emotional abuse tactic. And I'm just like, I was exploding it in my brain. Like the version you all just heard me say is me dialed back,
the processed
version.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
No, totally. I have had similar experiences where my child exhibited a single moment of what I would consider an unhealthy or abusive behavior towards another person. And I immediately went down the like catastrophizing, like he's going to end up arrested for assault. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is not the kid that you have in your home. Like he made a mistake. This garners a conversation. And like some follow-up and check-in conversations, but like this is not, your child is doomed to be an abusive and predatory individual.
Yeah.
So like it's hard as a parent. But like all of these things, practicing anti-oppression work is teaching kids how to have healthy relationships.
Yes.
How to treat other people. It's just on anti-oppression is a bigger scale versus the individual relationships. So like they all tie together.
Yeah.
So much so that we can't untangle the web. So like part of our directive as preventionists of sexual and domestic violence is also addressing and dreaming big to end oppression, which like obviously we're not going to see in our lifetime. But the goal is to reduce it, right? Reduce the harm that it causes, reduces the amount of oppression individuals are experiencing.
Yeah. And one of the best things that you can do for raising your kids is, and in this whole movement to end violence and oppression, is for you to practice anti-oppression.
And and so they see it.
Yeah.
So they hear it. So they're surrounded by it.
Well, and even the way in which you treat your children as an adult, because that's a power over as well. And so really getting that awareness in you, and it is such a good practice for them to understand, like, wow, sometimes I experience adults that have authority over me and I have to obey, but this person, like, they respect me. They set boundaries for me because they care about me, but they also have conversations about those boundaries with me.
Yeah.
They're
transparent.
Yeah, you're teaching them about this healthy relationship, that even though there is like this inherent power differential, we can navigate that together.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It was making me think of when we spoke to Janine, and she said about caregivers for children that maybe like are non-vocal or nonverbal, and they might have, hey, I'm going to lift your leg now and put it in, whatever in your shoe. I'm going to do that. Like, so you're explaining the process, and you might even be like, hey, if this isn't okay with you, if they can like raise their hand, right? Or give you a thumbs down. Right. Like you're giving them tools to communicate what's not okay for them. And then you're going to listen and adapt to that. Mm-hmm. We love you, Janine.
Yes.
So I want to just define a couple things.
Yes.
As we get into this anti-oppression journey. And that's going to be the difference between equality, equity, and justice. Because a lot of times people conflate these terms into one thing, and they are a little bit different. If somebody was talking to me, would I like correct them? Be like, actually, that's equity, not equality? No. Might I in my head? Yes, but that's because I'm a jerk in that way.
At least you keep it in.
I hold it in. So let me define equality. So first things first, equality means everyone gets an equal whatever. So everyone gets the same support or the same prize, whatever that might be. Equity means people get what they need based on their individual needs. So like not everyone's going to get the same thing. Some people might get more of one thing or more of another thing. And I'll give you an example in just a second. But like justice is what we're striving for. And you're fixing the problems or the systems that are causing people to experience these inequities. So there's a few examples out there. I was going to do this like college tuition one, but I think I'm going to do the shoes one. I know everybody has heard the shoes one, but it's just such a good example. So for equality, to practice inequality when it comes to shoes, you would give every single person the same shoe. You might give a work boot, a men's 8 work boot to every person. Obviously, that is not going to work for everyone's individual needs, right? I would not wear a men's 8. That would not fit my foot. Additionally, a work boot is not a footwear thing that I need, right? I'm not in a construction site. When I'm in my office, work boots are not really necessary. I'd prefer slippers, to be honest, but we're not there. But equity would be everyone would get the shoe size they need for whatever their need is. So like if you were a soldier, you would get maybe a combat boot and it would be in your size. If you were a toddler who is just learning how to walk, you might get a little baby shoe that's just perfect for kiddos learning how to walk, like a non-stick, non-slippery surface shoe or something, right? So that's the difference between equity and equality. And you could see why there could be a problem with that, right? Because like, great, I'm so glad you're giving away shoes to everyone who doesn't have shoes, but I can't use this shoe, this work boot. Mm-hmm. And then justice would be removing the barriers to getting the shoes that you need. So like you could walk into a store, just down the street from your house. You didn't need transportation to get there. And everyone has a voucher for a free shoe of whatever size and whatever kind that they need. So that would be justice. You don't have to pay for it, right? Or you have a voucher so you can get it for free. If you need to, right? But like if you had zillions of dollars, you would not be getting that voucher because you didn't need the voucher.
Right.
Does that make sense? Am I explaining it okay?
Yeah, I think that last part, expound on it just a little bit more. Like because
the justice part?
The part where, if you didn't need the voucher.
Yes. Yeah. So like it would be like you think about, well, first, what's their need? Do they have shoes? Likelihood is if you're a multimillionaire, you've got a variety of different shoes, right? Like we've seen on whatever, like MTV Cribs or something. I don't think that's still a show, but you walk in and this is my shoe closet and they have like 800 shoes. Those folks are not in need of shoes.
Right.
But our friends that are in need of shoes would be given this voucher.
Right.
And all of the barriers to getting to the shoe store to get your shoe would be accounted for or removed. Here's your bus voucher if you need to go to it, right. Or it's just down the street and it's on an accessible sidewalk if you have a wheelchair. Like you'd be considering all of the things. I would love to say that's something I'm going to see in my lifetime. But the amount of work that goes into it, I don't think I'm going to see that in my lifetime.
Yeah. And I'm assuming it would also have to take into account things like income levels.
Yes. Yep.
And
it's really complicated for sure.
Yeah. The cost of things in general.
That's why we're not the only reason. That's part of the reason we're not there. Because it is complicated. We don't really know how to execute these things. Appropriately or the right way.
It's got to be like a very coordinated effort.
Yeah, and truly in my mind it would be like start over.
Yeah.
Abolish and start over.
Like out west, I know that they're doing things like housing first and where they're like, okay, we're going to eliminate this barrier to things like employment and things like all this other stuff. We're going to give people who are homeless the house. And then they can rebuild their life rather than them having to struggle for that too.
Yeah, no, totally. Because if you are homeless and maybe you suffer from a mental health condition, maybe you are addicted to a substance, whatever the case may be, like you can't necessarily always work on those things all at the same time.
And you need a case manager. I'm sorry.
For sure.
I don't know how people do this without case managers.
No, totally. Yeah. But like you have to have some stability in some piece or aspect of your life so that you can start addressing other problems, in quotes, that you might have.
And just even thinking about, connecting it back to domestic violence services, that's what an emergency domestic violence shelter is. Not only that place to go in an emergency, but as you're there, the ideal situation is that you're working with a case manager to start getting things in place. So at least you are in a place that you're able to start out at and then get things in order and have somebody assisting you so that you can take the next step and, get into your next apartment or house or and access the benefits that you need to access. But there's a whole application process for those kinds of things. And if you've just left your life behind, what do you have? And so you're rebuilding.
And if you haven't had to apply for like aid from the state or the county, it is real. Those forms are a lot. They use jargon that some people just wouldn't even know what the term means. There are some places you can leave it blank and some places you can't. Like, it is so complicated just to apply to receive food stamps.
Right.
And so, like, that is why, essentially, that's why we have social workers, right? They're here to help support people through these processes because these processes are complicated.
They're very complicated. And even just thinking about, okay, now you're going to get a job. If you have children, you have to think about childcare. You have to,
who's going to take care of these kids when I'm getting a job? Like,
and then there's the cost of childcare. I don't know.
Yes.
At
the risk of going off on a tangent.
Yeah, let's.
Which we tend to do. Melissa, tell us about the first mini series that we're going to be looking at this season.
Yes. So this season, because it is LGBTQ History Month in October, we are going to be doing an LGBTQ mini series, which are actually going to be quite a few episodes because we're trying to cut our episodes in half so that they are easier to digest in a smaller amount of time, especially for caregiver schedules. I think it makes sense.
About the car ride length.
Yeah, hopefully. So the media we love this episode is from the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center. Now, I was looking at some public health videos of examples between the difference between equality, equity, and justice. And some of them were kind of dry, and I wanted to be able to link to a video that has the shoe example that Heather was mentioning, and then it goes into that common example that many people use of looking over the fence to see a baseball game. So really you get to play with two images there. So you can find that video in the show notes.
Coming up on our next episode, we're going to be starting our LGBTQ plus youth series. It's a little bit of a mini series, and we are excited to launch that during October because October is LGBTQ History Month. So thank you for listening. Keep on listening if you'd like to hear some resources, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Look out for new podcasts every other Monday on anywhere that you can find your podcasts. Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Anchor FM, you name it. We're there. If you have any questions, and we would love to hear from you, you can email us at saferjourneyspod@safejourneysillinois.org. You can also message us on social media. We have a Facebook and an Instagram that you can find us at. And let's talk about some resources for anyone who's experiencing abuse. If you happen to live in and around LaSalle or Livingston County in Illinois, please feel free to call Safe Journeys support line at 815-673-1555. 24/7, confidential, services are free. If you don't happen to be in our area, there are two national hotlines that you can call for support. For sexual violence, you can call RAIN with 2 N's. That's the National Sexual Violence Hotline. Their phone number is 800-656-HOPE. They also have a live chat on their website if you're interested. And for domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, you can call the hotline, which is simply thehotline.org. And this is our national domestic violence hotline. And you can give them a call at 800-799-SAFE or chat live on the website. Thanks for listening.